Hi folks, my name is Neil. I am from India and I graduated with a Bachelor of Economics degree from the University of Tasmania in Australia. My hobbies are traveling, reading, playing cricket, and watching documentaries. Through my channel Neil Talks, I aim to keep everyone updated with the current issues happening globally. So if you like my videos, please do not forget to like, comment, share, subscribe and press the bell icon for further updates. Some negative consequences of war include inflation, rise in the oil prices, damage to the infrastructure, rise in the unemployment and underemployment rates, high rates of uncertainty among businesses, high rates of government debt leading to a debt trap, a rise in the psychological cost, and a disruption to the normal economic activities. Psychological cost. Now, in reality, it is very hard to estimate the psychological cost of war. But there are several effects after a war, which may include the pain of death, fear, suffering, and disability. A conflict can leave the soldiers and the common people traumatized for the rest of their lives. According to a research paper released by the IZA Institute of Labor Economics, it was found that conflicts can be associated with a substantial increase in suicidal thoughts and post-traumatic stress disorder. This results in an increase in the financial cost of the government, as the government must incur additional costs by spending extra amounts on mental health related matters and the cost of rebuilding an economy after the devastation of war. War and inflation. War can cause a rise in the general price level of goods and services. It leads to a loss in the personal savings of individuals and a rise in the levels of uncertainty among the financial systems. For instance, due to the conflicts within Russia and Ukraine, the oil prices have jumped to their highest peak in 7 years, and gas prices jumped by 60% in one day. This is because several countries like the US, UK, and Australia have imposed economic sanctions on Russia. The food prices have also been affected. Several analysts have warned that a war in recent times, just after the pandemic, can cause the global wheat prices to double and negatively affect the production of grains globally. This would significantly affect shoppers in Egypt, Turkey, and some countries in North Africa. If a country is devastated by war and its capacity to locally produce goods is reduced, then it can result in hyperinflation. It can force the government to desperately print money to try and deal with the lack of goods. For example, in 1946, Hungary and Austria experienced the highest rates of unemployment on record. War and oil prices. War also causes a rise in fuel prices, which could potentially affect the aviation and automobile industry in a negative manner, which could lead to high rates of unemployment and a fall in the taxation revenue earned by the government. For example, during the Gulf War in 1990, the prices of oil rose from $21 a barrel to a peak of $46 a barrel by mid-October. Similarly, due to the current conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, the oil prices have jumped to their highest peak in 7 years, and gas prices jumped by 60% in one day. This is because several countries like the US, UK, and Australia have imposed economic sanctions on Russia, which has caused the supply of oil to fall and put an upward pressure on the oil prices. Now, let us look at the cost of war. There is an opportunity cost on the government whenever a war takes place. The government spending on military items increases, whereas the spending on healthcare services and education falls. According to a report by the Watson Institute, the cost of the Iraq War was about $2 trillion. This $2 trillion could have been effectively spent on other development projects like the construction of roads and bridges. War can cause severe negative impacts on the economic development of a particular country. It can cause a fall in the tourism, foreign and domestic investment. It can cause a shorter life expectancy and a decline in the GDP and GDP per capita. A report entitled Africa's Missing Billions estimated that the cost of war in Africa is almost equal to the amount of international aid. In Congo, around 4 million individuals died, and it cost the government an additional amount of 9 billion euros, which is roughly about 29% of its GDP. The report also suggests that war can lead to a rise in crime rates and increase in the availability of weapons that causes an increase in the rates of armed violence. The graph shows the projections of the actual losses that have been incurred by Burundi during the civil war. It shows that a decade of conflict is a major cause of its falling GDP and GDP per capita. War and national debts. The amount of public debt generally increases during a war. The government is generally willing to borrow more than its usual levels, as there is a certain amount of patriotic support for the war effort. This results in a budget deficit and may force the government to impose higher tax rates in the future. It can also cause the government to take other measures such as a reduction in benefit payments, increased borrowing from domestic banks that may result in a higher interest rate in the future, and a reduction in the spending on other developmental activities. In other words, it does not allow the government to maintain its goal of a balanced budget. Now, we will look at how war and the environment are related to each other. During a war, the amount of CO2 emissions made in the air increases and it contributes to climate change. Large-scale vehicle movements can cause significant damage to sensitive landscapes. The extensive use of weapons in urban areas causes a substantial amount of soil and air pollution. Wrecked ships, submarines, and offshore oil infrastructure can cause marine pollution. Military training can create a significant amount of noise pollution from the use of weapons, aircrafts, and vehicles. It causes an increase in deforestation as there is sometimes overharvesting by communities who suddenly rely heavily on wood and charcoal for fuel and heat. However, having said that, there are some positive impacts of war in an economy. Although the given effects below can easily be achieved without any kinds of conflicts or wars. These may include high rates of innovation as the government invests heavily in new technologies. An example of this is the invention of jet engines during the Second World War, which could have been used for peaceful purposes. Changes in the social attitudes within a society also takes place. For example, more women start entering the labor market and start gaining more independence, which results in an increase in economic growth. This would be covered in further detail in my next upcoming video. So if you like my videos, please do not forget to like, comment, share, subscribe and press the bell icon for future updates.